717-516-89. Like I say, if you want to get in on the conversation, this is your chance. Otherwise, I'm just going to go out and see how easy it is to contract Ebola. And pretty much how am I going to do that? I don't know. I'm just going to wander around in public and just see what's going on out there. In all seriousness. Oh, yeah. Listen to saying, yeah, he did vomit somewhere. You know, the answer is the Ebola virus is all over the place. All over the place. And I'm not trying to scare you, by the way. Somebody said, all right, Carl, you're just trying to draw up business and scare people. No, I want to remind people that you need to be prepared. You need to be vigilant. And the government isn't going to tell you when it gets really bad. So if you're watching at all, and I don't know if anybody's watching The Strain, based on a book by Guillermo del Toro, great director, great visionary for movies. In that book, and it's vampires, of course, and I love vampires. Absolutely love them. Well, in that book, there's a plague, a vampiric plague, starting in New York, and the Center for Disease Control is involved. And F, the doctor, Efron, he is trying to get the word out about this plague. But the internet's been shut down by a wealthy guy. And how do you shut down the internet? Well, he paid $1 gazillion to some hackers to temporarily disrupt internet traffic. And they've injected political influence and bought off politicians and bought off the news media. And they're controlling the flow of information. They only need to do it for a few days. They just don't want anybody to know what's really happening as this plague of vampirism moves out of New York. And that's the plan. That's the plan, okay? Well, sound familiar? As long as the government doesn't let us know what's really happening, we don't have a chance to react. We don't have a chance to panic. We don't get to choose what happens to us. They choose for us. Whether it's, okay, we stop the infection or it's going to burn through the population, we'll make the choice about when to tell you what. Information, the flow of information. Now, we're seeing information come out, but of course, you would be a terrible news outlet if you caused mass panic, right? That's not right. You can't cause panic. You can't cause panic. What if they'd said, you can't report that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. That'll lead to people wanting to go to war with Japan. We can't have that because that's not our it was what our goal was at the time. So maybe we moved the ships from the deep water to the shallow water to let the Japanese bomb them so we could get the populace in. Maybe we sank the Lusitania. Maybe the rebels blew up the Maine. Maybe the government isn't telling you everything we need to know about Ebola, and that's my point on this. Be vigilant, protect your family, get an extra bottle of bleach, get some extra rubber gloves, get some MREs, make sure you have water on hand. The way we'll prevent the spread of it, by the way, kids, if it does really start to break out, as long as it doesn't go airborne, and even if it does go airborne, it's contact with other people, right? So you shelter in place. Shelter in place. That's bad for politics. Think about this. We got a presidential election coming up. We've got congressional elections coming up more immediately. And we can't have a slow economy. We can't have the stock market dipping. We can't have people staying in their homes and not consuming movies and burning gas and doing everything they need to be doing to keep the economy humming. So we can't scare people into complacency. We can't scare them into staying home. We can't scare them into sheltering into place because that's bad for the economy. So there's a lot of perverse incentives here. There's a lot of desire not to shut things down prematurely. Hey, you know what? It stinks. Sometimes you want to go golfing, okay? And those of you who golf will understand this. Those of you who don't golf can equate it somehow to something in your life besides needlepoint, I'm sure. You say, hey, it's going to rain. It looks like it's going to rain out. I should not go golfing. And then you don't go golfing, and then it never rains. And you want to, beat yourself in the skull and say, I wasted a perfectly good afternoon. thinking it was going to rain when I could have enjoyed myself golfing. And now the daylight's fading and the days are getting shorter and I won't be able to golf anymore. It's happened to me, by the way. Well, of course, you could have been bold and gone out there and golfed and gotten rained on, gotten all wet, struck by lightning, God knows what. But my point is, it does stink to shut down the economy. It does stink to have people being more cautious about contact with others. It will hurt the economy. And that could hurt politicians because it could hurt job rebounds and numbers that people want to see. So maybe there's some incentive not to tell people to get too conservative because of what's going on. Don't get too crazy. Don't get too protective of yourself and others because that's just not good business. And if it turns out that there is Ebola, well, and it's burning through the population, we'll live with it. But if there isn't, then it wasn't a good choice. Coming back to, again, the government may make decisions to tell you or not tell you about the realities of a situation based on their belief of what is best for the economy, what is best for the government, what is best for the populace, not what is best for you, me, or your children. So you just have to know that. If you're one of these people, and I know the type, I deal with them all the time. I see you guys post on Facebook. You believe that if the government says something, it must be true. It must be. They wouldn't want to hurt me. They could care less about you. You're just one of many. Care about the masses. Caller, you're on the air.
How you doing, Carl? This is Dwayne.
Hey, Dwayne. What's going on, my friend?
Oh, you just, what a depressing subject. You know what I mean? Did I hear right today? Okay, this guy landed in Texas, I guess confirmed with Ebola. And did I understand it right that they gave him antibiotics and sent him home?
Okay, well, he came from Liberia, ends up in America. He's here legitimately. He's walking among us. He gets a little sick, so he goes to the emergency room. While he's at the emergency room, despite learning a little bit about his history, they basically prescribe him antibiotics and send him home thinking it might be like the flu or something, which would be a virus, so you shouldn't give antibiotics anyhow. But, a lot of doctors just prescribe antibiotics to patients in case it's bacterial and also on the placebo effect theory. Of course, that's bad, and it's not supposed to have been doing that for like the last 5 or 7 years because they're breeding superbugs and MRSA that way. But, hey, that's okay. Maybe they just did what a lot of doctors do and give the guy a script and send him out the door because it's just going to get better naturally. Of course, whichever doctor signed off on this, whichever nurse triaged this guy, or whichever physician's assistant, wrote this script, however it turns out it was, obviously missed the memo that you got to screen people for Ebola when they've been in West Africa recently. Then he goes back into the population while he's obviously, because remember, they keep saying, you aren't infectious until you show symptoms. Well, okay, he showed symptoms, and then they sent him back into the population, and 2 days later, he rides by ambulance back to the hospital because at this point he's probably bleeding out the eyes and vomiting up blood and doing all the things that an advanced Ebola patient does. He probably exposed a hell of a lot of people, potentially.
But at the time they released him, did they suspect Ebola?
No, not at all. No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Then I kind of misread into that like they knew the guy had it and they sent him out the door. I mean,
no, they just completely dropped the ball. By the way, the medical establishment kills like 100,000 people a year, okay?
Right.
But doctors are being wrongly sued by people. Just ask them. Just ask their lobby. But, yeah, they do kill 100,000 people a year, with bad drugs, misadventure during medical operations, as they like to call it, kind of like stuff happens. And I love doctors, don't get me wrong. I know a lot of great doctors. But my point is I think they actually kill more people than drunk drivers. But we are obsessed with getting drunk drivers off the road. We're not too worried about what happens at the hospital because doctors have magic powers. They know stuff we don't. So even though they kill a lot of people, not much we can do about it.
Right. So,
Unfortunately, yes. So anyhow, I think I've said enough about Ebola tonight, and I'm going to wrap this show up, Dwayne. So I appreciate you calling in.
Hey, I do have a question.
Okay, shoot.
It's totally off the Ebola subject, but I would say it's no more less, negative. But I was listening to somebody the other night, and they were explaining implied consent.
Okay.
In the law, like for instance, I guess you get people pulled over for a DUI.
Right. Implied
or
implied consent is a legal fiction, just like constructive possession is. Implied consent means that because you've bought a license or committed an activity, and I say committed an activity, not like a crime, but done something like drove, for instance, that you've implicitly consented to certain things. And so I'll give you an example. If I buy a ticket to the White House, right, to tour the White House,
right,
and I get there and they want me to go through a metal detector and they want to search my bag, and I say, you can't do that. That violates my rights. I have a Fourth Amendment right, blah, blah, blah. Well, the guy would look at you and say, didn't you implicitly consent to being searched when you went into the White House? I mean, we all know that you're going to be searched and your bag's going to be looked at before you get to meet the President of the United States, right?
You should have just jumped the fence and walked right in.
Well,
You'd have been better off.
Correct. But you see what I mean? That concept of implied consent. In other words, sometimes when you do something, everybody would agree. Now, some of them are more nebulous, because the law then says if you've done this activity, then you've agreed. So hunting's a great example. If you're out in the woods walking around with a gun during hunting season, with a rifle, with your hunting license on your back, there's a pretty good, strong argument that you've implicitly consented to a certain amount of review by the game warden, more so than a guy just walking down the street with a concealed carry gun. Well, for driving, they say you've implicitly consented to give blood, breath, or urine. That search and seizure law doesn't apply.
Okay. But in other words, did somewhere like when we obtained a Pennsylvania driver's license, did we
implicitly consented. And remember, ignorance of the law is never an excuse. So the law says you've implicitly consented to these things by obtaining a driver's license. The fact that you didn't know that is no excuse. Listen, they could write into the law. Now think about this. Since ignorance of the law is no excuse, they could write a law that says that eating shredded wheat is a per se crime, and you agree to forfeit your car if you eat shredded wheat. They could just put that in there. And if you never read it or didn't hear about it and the news media didn't publicize it and you ate some shredded wheat, they could take your car because you implicitly consented. Because it's in the law. So it's a civil action. It's remedial, blah, 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 blah. Now, of course, say sometimes if it's too punitive, then it's no longer something you can implicitly consent to. But courts have said putting people in jail is a civil issue in some cases, and they've, that's not sufficient to amount to punishment because judges are trying to basically allow for the good administration of government. Remember, the good administration of government has nothing to do with your rights or my rights. It has everything to do with just getting stuff done. Us be damned.
Right. Like this person was explaining, though, for a guy like me that doesn't really understand the law, implied consent would be, let's say I got a real estate agent to go show me a house. And when I got to the house, there was a car in the garage.
Right.
And I buy the house, and I go to settlement, and they give me the keys to the house, and then I say, well, where are the keys to the title and the keys to my car? Well, what do you mean? Well, the car was in the house, and when I sold the house, so the car should go along with it. Now that's implied consent.
A lawyer,
right? Is that
a lawyer would say to you that was just your theory, but the problem with that is cars and houses are titled property. Okay,
correct.
And titles are different. So if someone had left some item in the house and it was in the house and you thought it was part of the house or came with the house, you'd have a pretty good argument. If it's separately titled property like a car, the title controls, and if the title's not transferred, it belongs to the titled owner.
Okay, so that's not a good analogy.
Not a good analogy, right? And it's only thrown off.
The analogy would be if there's a refrigerator and a washer dryer, and
actually those appliances, my friend, are a great example. Are they fixtures or not fixtures? Because fixtures to real estate, like a lamp, okay,
right,
comes with the house.
Right.
Washer dryer, maybe not fixtures. Maybe is fixtures. There's better arguments that they're not fixtures. And so